Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And during this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, I have family law attorney Rhia Bornmann, owner of Bornmann Family Law, PLLC, all the way from Minneapolis in Minnesota. Now, Rhia, an authority in the area of family law, will be talking to you today about a very interesting topic. Rhea's here to talk about the ways in which Minnesota law does unwed fathers a great disservice. Wow, I just can't wait to dig into this. It sounds great. So, if you are one of the many unwed fathers in the state of Minnesota, it might be a good idea just to take a break. Log out of Facebook or Twitter or maybe you're Instagramming or any other kind of distraction. Grab yourself a notepad and pen and listen in to what Rhia has to share with us today. So with that said, let's not keep her waiting any longer. Welcome to the show, Rhia.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. So, Rhia, in your own words, briefly, just describe the types of people who you serve and the various types of situations they find themselves in when they come to you for your help.
No problem. Well, I would say that, of course, I serve people who are getting divorced. That would be my main group of clientele. Mm-hmm. But I also have a passion for fathers who have not been married but have a child with their partner, and the way that Minnesota law treats those individuals. And then, of course, that carries over to divorcing fathers as well, that they often are not treated on the same footing as mothers when it comes time for custody and parenting time, and those decisions made by a judge or even in trying to settle the matter.
Okay, so keeping in mind that anything you share with us today, Rhia, is not legal advice or legal assistance. And I'm sure that, when you think about any of the misconceptions that you come across on a day-to-day basis, that there must be hundreds of them. People come to you with preconceived notions. They've heard something from a friend, from a family member, from a colleague, or they've researched it on Google, and they come to you with these preconceived notions that they believe to be true. However, you have to spend time debunking those myths before you can actually get to helping them to solve their problems. So of all those misconceptions that you come across on a day-to-day basis then, Rhia, what's the most common misconception that you see while you're out there helping your clients on a day-to-day basis?
I would say that there are two. One of which is exactly the topic that we're discussing today, which is that mothers and fathers are considered on an equal footing in the eyes of the law. And that is absolutely not true. And then the second would be that children get to decide where they go. That's one of the ones I hear the most often. A parent will say, well, when does my kid get to decide? When does it matter? Or when will the court listen to my kid say he doesn't want to go to mom's house or he doesn't want to go to dad's house? And that's just one of the many factors that a judge will consider in a family law case in Minnesota.
Right. So based on what you just shared with us, Rhia, and keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, can you share an example or maybe 2 or 3 examples of how you've helped someone who came to you with those challenges, with those misconceptions that you just described, and what kind of transformational results you were able to gain for them?
Sure. Oftentimes, when parents have a child without being married, they are in a relationship, right? And maybe that relationship continues for a while and they successfully either live together or maybe they even split up and successfully co-parent for a while. But then usually there's some bump in the road that comes along, right? One of them gets a new girlfriend or one of them takes a job that's further away, or something sets the other one off to be mad at them, right? And
Right,
then,
exactly.
and then the parenting time plan that they may have agreed on or been following smoothly no longer works for them. So that's when then oftentimes, unfortunately, mothers, because Minnesota law gives them the right to, may make a change that father doesn't want to go along with. But father doesn't have the same rights as mother if he wasn't married at the time the child was born. And one of the documents that couples often sign when a child is born is an ROP, or a recognition of parentage. And oftentimes dads come to me saying, well, I signed that. I'm on the birth certificate. And they think that that means that they have legal custody, which in Minnesota includes the right to make decisions about religion, education, and medical. And they think that they get to have a say, right, about their parenting time use. I should be able to pick my child up whenever I want. You know, mom is saying I can't come get him, or I can't get him from daycare. She told the daycare I can't pick him up. That's not fair. What's going on? Right? And so Minnesota law requires that men actually file a lawsuit, because that's the technical legal term, against mother for custody and parenting time. So they have to ask a judge, or of course, if they settle it throughout the process, but they have to ask a judge to ultimately sign a document in the end of the process that says that they're either a joint legal custodian, meaning that they can make those decisions with mom, or that they have parenting time according to a schedule they've agreed to, or that the judge picks. And that parenting time schedule, Minnesota law has a statute that covers the minimum amount a father or a non-primary parent is to get, and it's 25%. So that means the most the court legally has to give dad, if there's no domestic violence in the relationship, because of course then that opens a whole nother door where dad could be looking at even less time. But if there's no domestic violence in the relationship or alleged, then the most the court has to give dad is 25% time. And that ends up looking like that schedule that we often see where dad picks up on Friday, returns Monday, and has a night during the week. So every other weekend and a day during the week. That's a pretty common schedule. A lot of people in Minnesota, at least, are used to seeing or hearing that a dad has. Not an equal schedule, like every other week, or a 5-2-2-5, where mom has Monday, Tuesday, dad has Wednesday, Thursday, and then they alternate weekends, something like that. I will say that there's a lot of talk about the legislation moving towards making a presumption in dad's favor that he can have equal time to mom, but it hasn't passed. It's been talked about for years, the whole time I've been doing this, and before even, but it never seems to make it through and become law. Some judges, which we should give them credit for, are moving in that direction with their recommendations. I've seen a lot of the family mental health professionals and the people who specialize in children's mental health that make recommendations to the court or to the parties when they end up in a mediation, pushing families towards that equal time, but it's not the law yet.
So just as a reminder then, Rhia, today's topic is the ways in which Minnesota law does unwed fathers a great disservice. Now, with that in mind, and for those unwed fathers out there wanting to know more, Rhia, what's the most common but unknown pitfall that they should always remember, no matter what situation they find themselves in, no matter how they feel?
Well, I would say that fighting with the other party is probably one of the biggest pitfalls, right? The researchers and the mental health professionals have found that children don't suffer as much from a divorce or from their parents splitting. They suffer from watching the ongoing fighting or being used as the message carrier between the two, right? Of course, that's a common one, right? And so although it's important for fathers to fight for their rights legally, leave the kids out of it. So I would recommend stay as amicable as possible with the other parent, but do assert your right to be a father legally as early on as you can in your situation, especially if you're getting along at the time. Don't wait until you're mad at each other and it becomes ugly and costs a lot more.
You know something, Rhea, I'm so glad you brought up this point, because it brings to light the very reason why I started this series, Let's Talk Divorce. I myself am a child of divorce. I'm going on 55 years old now, but at the time I was only 11, 12 years old, along with my younger brother, who's 6 years younger than myself. And my parents back then, we're talking 1978, 1979, they had a very volatile, a very violent, there was lots of shouting, lots of fighting, lots of blood. And we witnessed that as young children. And as you mentioned, we were used as, almost like a ping pong in the game of table tennis, where sometimes my mother would say, you're just like your father and you need to go to him and he's this and he's that. And then vice versa. So we were caught in the middle. And being children, you are totally powerless. You do not have a voice. And that's the reason why I started this series, to bring experts like yourself onto the show, to share your experience, to share your knowledge from a perspective of being a professional, so that in the hope, a divorcing couple, a unwed father, whatever the case may be, just in the hope that maybe just one couple will listen to the advice being shared here. Remember, it's not legal advice, it's just information. But just to tune into that and maybe just to change their perspective and say to themselves, look, regardless of how we feel towards each other, and one party may rightly feel very bitter, they've been cheated on or whatever the case may be, we have to put our children first and protect the children, because they're the ones that don't have the voice. So if that happens and it changes the perspective, it changes the approach, it changes the mentality of just one divorcing couple out there, then for me, this is a huge success. This is why we're doing this. So I'm so happy that you mentioned that point of staying as amicable as possible before it gets to that point where people just don't see eye to eye anymore and they're just at each other's throats. So I know you've already touched on this, but just in case there are divorcing couples out there, as well as those unwed fathers, and they are at that stage right now, Rhea, where they're at each other's throats, and they may rightly feel so that they have every right to be so. However, there are children involved. What would you say to those people? And again, a reminder, this is not legal advice.
Well, I would say take to heart what you just said about your own experience, and then remember that the kids love you both, whether they want to or not. They just do. And no matter what you do, they're going to love you both. So that's a good thing and a bad thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. Speaking from experience. And the sad thing is, I'm nearly 55 now, but it took me decades, I'm talking 20 years of my life to be able to comfortably address the issues that were caused through that divorce. As a young teenager, I had no idea why I had low confidence. I had no idea why I used to think about life the way how I used to think back in those days. And it took me a very long time of inward reflection and speaking with people, speaking with experts, just to, face that invisible enemy that was caused by my parents. So again, if you are a divorcing parent out there, think not just about what's happening today, but what you say and what you do will have a massive impact, whether it's positive or whether it's negative. It will have an impact on those vulnerable children around you. So I hope you do listen to what Rhia has to share with you today and my little personal story and the reason why we're doing this show. So thank you so much for being on this show, Rhia. I've still got a few more questions, but I've kind of gone a little bit off track and brought myself in here. You're the star of the show, actually. So I need to just shut up and let you do the speaking here.
Absolutely not. That right there is exactly why family law scares a lot of attorneys away, but also is so important because everyone has a story. Everyone has a personal connection. Everyone has a family, whether it's been broken or taken away from you. You had one, you came from one, right? And it affects you. And the question is for how many years, right? When you talk about your situation and the parents making the right choices so that the kids can go on and have their own struggles with their own issues, not having to deal with the parents as well.
Yeah, it has a huge domino effect. It affected my exams in school. It affected the decisions I made earlier on in my life, in what direction I would go when I left school. It affected my relationships with the opposite sex. It affects so many different things. Yep. When, as a kid, you learn to blame yourself for the breakup of your parents. So anyway, enough said on that point then, Rhia. So far, just to recap, we've spoken about some of the misconceptions that are out there, the things that people believe to be true but are not true. And you so very well addressed that point. We've just spoken about a couple of the unknown pitfalls that they need to be aware of. So for those unwed fathers that are out there, Rhia, could you just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself, and especially in terms of your background and your formal education, your experience as it relates to the topic of family law and how you're out there helping these unwed fathers?
Okay. Well, I won't tell you too much about my personal story, but of course you would imagine that chauffeured me right into this field, right? I'm a child that was adopted, and I've got a story of past experiences that make me very passionate about keeping kids and families together. And I really think that both parents are valuable, no matter how, quote, screwed up they may be, right? And so one of the things that I do appreciate about our court system is that we can ask the courts for help to get parents back on track. We do have the mechanisms in place, so to speak, where the court can order a parent maybe to go to counseling or go to mental health or chemical dependency testing treatment, any of those kinds of things to find out the root of the issues the parent may be having. I mean, of course, we take an attitude that you can screw yourself up if you want, but you need to get it together if you're affecting your kids. And so that's one area that I like about family law. But back to your question, I'm sorry. I've been practicing for 5+ years. I have taken on more cases than most in my position because I'm a solo practitioner and started out with a large bleeding heart that meant I pretty much could never say no. And did more pro bono cases, more free cases, more very cheap cases than most of my colleagues. And I have had to move more towards a work-life balance as I've gotten older and have my own family. I'm in a blended family as well as we have a son together. And so there's a lot of other responsibilities I have now that has me more streamlining as far as what kind of cases I take. And but it's been awesome to meet all the people I've met along the way. All of my business seems to come from referrals, so I must be doing something right.
Exactly.
And that's about me.
Yeah, that sounds great, Rhia. So let me ask you this then, Rhia. When you think about all of the people who you've helped in the past, and obviously all the people who you're going to help in the future, when you think about those people, what's the one question that when they come to you for your help that you wish they should have asked you? What would be that one question?
probably something to do with parenting time. I mean, I would say that oftentimes people come to my office saying, well, I want equal time, or I want this, or I want that. But then actually getting them to figure out, especially, of course, if they're not talking to the other party, what the kid's schedule is, what their own work schedule is, what's actually practical. So have a plan. You know what I mean? With that, look at the lives of your child, yourself, your significant other, and figure out what can you make work. And sometimes people need to make a job change, right? If you work overnight, then it might not work to have your kid overnight unless you've got a backup in the house. Or if you get up at 5 a.m, you probably will struggle to get your kid to school because you won't, you've got to get to work, and who's your backup? That used to be that spouse if you're getting divorced. How are you going to make things work so that the kids' transition is as smooth as possible, but yet you get the most time with them that you can?
So, Rhia, we're finally coming towards the end of the show. Just got a couple of more questions before we wrap things up. I'd just like you for a moment just to picture those unwed fathers who come to you for a consultation, and they want to know more about the ways in which the Minnesota law does unwed fathers a great disservice. Now, with that picture in mind, Rhia, what final thoughts would you like to leave them with before we move on to our last question for today?
Well, one piece that I know is partly the purpose of my job would be for them to be educated on the statute that covers the quote, the best interest of the child. It's a term we constantly throw out in family cases. And there's a statute that lists them all. And the factors have changed over the years, but they're generally the same, right? They're going to look into which household might be more stable, which one maybe has a sibling that the child is close to, which one does this, which one does that. I mean, it's a long list. And as I mentioned earlier, the child's preference, if they're of a suitable age to have an opinion, is one of those factors. But to read those and see what you can be doing to make sure that you are on as equal of a footing as mom as possible. Because if you come in to the courtroom and you only see your kid once a week, you only show up at practices or games once in a while, you don't go to doctor's appointments, you don't go to school conferences, you've moved multiple times in the year, I mean, all of those are going to be things that the court considers. And it's important for dads, if they don't already have the instinct or didn't grow up with a stable environment themselves, to look at those things and see what they should be doing. And in a divorce situation, that goes for mom as well. But the reason, of course, we're talking about unwed fathers is because mom's already kind of given the benefit of the doubt about all those things. And that's where my job gets harder, of course, for dads.
You know, before I ask you the last question today, Rhia, I was looking through your website earlier on, and I found something on there that really piqued my interest, and I'd just like to share that with those unwed fathers out there that are listening to the show. So on Rhia's website, there is something, and I've kind of reworded it a little bit so that it actually sounds like her saying it, but it was written in third person. But it says something along the lines of this: I passionately believe in working with clients to serve the best interest of the children involved. Oftentimes, the best gift I can give to the parties includes the tools to improve their long-term relationships for the benefit of the children involved. Studies show parents fighting is what causes the children the long-term stress, not the divorce itself. And this is why we had to have you on the show today, to come here and share your expertise, this belief that you have, that you've expressed on your website. It's a beautiful thing, Rhia, and we're so happy that you've been able to come on here and share some of your insights, some of your knowledge, some of your expertise. And again, this is not legal advice, ladies and gentlemen. It's just purely information. So if there is somebody out there in the Minnesota areas, those unwed fathers who are wanting to know more, Rhia, how would they find you? How would they get in touch with you?
Well, as you mentioned, my website, that's probably the best, right? It's www.rhialawyer.com, and it has a spot on there for contact me. It's got my phone number plastered all over it. It's meant to make it easy, I guess, to find me and reach me. And I also would say that part of what you were referring to on my website with that piece about helping parents get along is I do have an emphasis in my practice on mediation. And so I'm also a registered mediator with the state of Minnesota that likes to help parties who just come from mediation and to work their issues out before court or before hiring attorneys of their own. So that's another piece that goes along with what I mentioned about the tools and helping with that amicable piece.
And I'm sure we've only just scratched the surface of how you can help people out there who find themselves in that unfortunate position of going through divorce. But we are limited by time. So,
no problem.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Rhia. And for you, whether you're out there cruising downtown or on the highway in your car, you're tuning in, or maybe you're out shopping or taking a run and listening on your personal headset. Whatever the case may be, we have to go. That's all we have time for today. So as a reminder, I have been speaking to family law attorney Rhia Bornmann. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Rhia. You have certainly, without a doubt, hands down, 100% demonstrated that you are a true educator, advocate, and trustworthy advisor for the success of your clients. So thank you.
Thank you, Stewart.
You are so welcome. And I think the biggest thank you needs to go to you, the unwed father, the listener. Thank you for joining us on this very insightful and informative discussion with one of the leading family law attorneys in the Minnesota area today. Again, her name was Rhia Bornmann. Don't forget her name. Make sure you do check her out. Give her a call. All the information is on her website. Whatever you do, I am sure you are going to be in the right place. So again, that's it. I'm Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading family law professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So until then, take care. Have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present, and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.